Well, good morning, Dove.
Good morning. How are you?
Good, good, thank you.
All right. Okay, so today we are up at the bottom of 21B. Um, Second line from the bottom. Time yet? How many have? Yeah. Okay. Um, and we're in the middle of discussing the rules of Esha Sifas Toar, which is a passage at the end of Devarim, Deuteronomy, where if during a war you capture a non-Jewish woman, you're allowed to sleep with her and, under certain circumstances, take her home and marry her. And the Gemara discusses some of the restrictions or details of this. The verse says, you see in the captivity. Bishas Shivya means it has to be at the time that she's captured. Like you can't I guess one would imagine that you could gather all the gather all the eligible women, and then everybody could have their pick. That's not the way it's allowed to work. If you encounter someone at the time you decide this is someone I must have, then that's when you're permitted to do it. Um, then there's some further clauses. Ashes, it says Ashes Upastoar, a woman of a beautiful woman. The term Ashes implies a few Ashes ish, even if she's married, um, because it uses the possessive form of woman. A woman Aleph, meaning, what I understand, a woman who belongs to someone else, as it were. Yifas Toar, she's beautiful. Well, Dibra Torah El Keneged Torah. It doesn't matter if she's beautiful or not, right? So this indicates that the Torah is what the Torah is doing is giving you a loophole because it knows. I think is the way to understand it. You're going to do this anyway, so at least you're going to do it in a structured way that is sanctioned by the law, but also comes with restriction. Muto sheyochlu Yisrael basar temusos shechutos v'alyochlu basar temusos nevelos. It draws a parallel to, let's say you have an animal that's sick, that's going to die, and it's got a nice steak in it. You know, it's not you want the meat, so it's better that you should slaughter it while it's still alive and not after and not just let it die, and then it wouldn't have benefited from any shchita, any ritual slaughter at all. So the same way here. I mean, I don't think the analogy is exact, but like rather than just willy nilly, take spoils of war from the women that you've captured, at least this way it's ritualized somewhat or standardized somewhat and restricted somewhat, so that it gives it that kind of imprimatur. So what the Gemara is saying is that this is not a normative kind of thing. This isn't the kind of thing that we would hope that people would do, but because people are who they are or what they are, we're going to at least give it some kind of structure and restriction. Um, okay, the chashakta means you'll want to keep her. Alpha pishin. This is even if she's not beautiful. So in other words, this is just demonstrating that the fact that the Torah says she's beautiful, it doesn't mean that this law only applies to beautiful women. It's someone you desire is beautiful to you. Um, it's the fact that the Torah says that you desire her. That's the operative word, not the fact that the not the perception that she's beautiful. You'll want her, right? Her in the singular. You can't take more than one, not her and someone else. You take her. The word Lakachta is the same word we use for marriage, so you can take her as your wife. L'chal isha, to you as a wife, but you can't have two wives, two of these. And we already said for yourself, but achas lo v'achas lavi. You can't bring home two women with the intention of giving one to your father, to your son. Um, you can only marry one. You can only sleep with one and marry her, and you can't take up additional ones for other people. Okay, Tanarabah. missed the line. V'havei, so you take her into your house. Malavish lo yilchatzana b'milchama. You can't um, pressure her or subjugate her during battle. In other words, it seems to mean that you can't sleep with her during the battle, which would be a little strange, right? I mean, you should be doing other things during the battle. Um, but what Rashi might mean to say is that um, you
Jesus.
you have to bring her home first before you can implement this like even on the battlefield after the battle is over. That's not the permitted place to implement this scheme. It's only you have to bring her home with you. Okay, now we're back to the piercing of the ear for an Eved Ivri, a Hebrew slave servant who wants to stay with his master after the 6 years. So there's a ritual of piercing his ear as a way to signify that he is staying. He's in for more for another longer term. Okay, so so the Mishnah has the Brisa says that since the Torah uses the phrase im amar yomar, doubling, which is a typical biblical expression, but often the Gemara makes something of it. If he doubling the word he says means you have to say it twice. The servant has to repeat his assertion that he wishes to stay with the master. Amar b'tchila sheish, Amar b'sel if he says it at the beginning of the 6 years of servitude, and he doesn't say it at the end, then we can't implement this extension with the ear piercing. Shenemar lo chafshi, because in describing the case, the Torah says when you say the servant says, "I'm not going free," ad sheyomar b'shas yitzia, it has to be said at the time that you would be leaving. In other words, at the end of the 6 years. Amar b'sof sheish, sheish. What if he says so at the end of the 6 years, but not at the beginning of the 6 years? And on again, it doesn't. We can't extend the term. Shenemar im Omar Yomar Ha'aved Yomar Kishu Eved. It says if the slave says, the servant says, so he has to say it while he's still a servant. So he can't just say it when the term expires. He has to say it what the Bryce actually says. We'll reinterpret in a minute is at the beginning of the term. Amar said, wait, you just said Amar b'skil sheish, Amar so sheish, and here's Shemar lo yitzei because it says I will not go out free. Then that implies that you have to say it at the end as well as at the beginning. So my yami lo yitzei chavshi. What do you need that for? That I'm not going out. It's clear that it has to be done at the end of the term because part of the description of the case is when the slave says, "I love my wife and my children and my master." Well, Veleka, that couldn't be if it's not at the end of the term, right? Like if it's only if this is excluding the possibility of saying I'm going to be in for the longer haul at the beginning of the term, because then you don't know if you're going to like the conditions or not. By the fact that the Torah says, since you like the conditions and you want to stay, it means you've already experienced the conditions. The two, and furthermore, the other half of the brisa. Amar b'sof sheish, if he only says it at the end and not the below of his sheish, not at the beginning and on the other side doesn't go. Shenemar im Amar yomar ha'eved. He has to say it while he's a slave, right? Amar atu sof sheish lav evedu. Like, what if you do it on the last day or the last week of your 6 years? Like you're still a slave, you're still a servant, so that should count. That you say when you're a servant. Why are you interpreting that to mean you have to say it at the beginning of your term? So Gemara reinterprets this. Amar Rava. Rava says, "B'tchilas pruta achrona." What does it mean at the beginning of your servitude? It means at the beginning of the last piece of your servitude. So you've been sold into servitude for $100,000 worth of debt. So when you get to the last penny, you kind of apportion that across the 6 years. When you get to the last penny, that's when you have to say before you've completed your term, but towards the end of it or almost at the end of it, that's what it means at the beginning, right? The beginning of the last chunk of servitude. And what does the end mean? Besof kutrachwana means at the very end of the service, but um, after yeah, so it doesn't mean at the end like when you're already free. You have to still be a servant, but the two times that you have to say this are right at the end of the 6 years. Um, okay, so that's kind of reinterpreting the Brisa into something that it's unlikely that it really meant, right? Because like it's Sheish and the Sheish seems to say mean at the beginning of the 6 years and the end of the 6 years, which to me would be kind of a way of restricting this at all. Like who's ever going to do that? Say at the beginning of 6 years, I'm going to double my term at the end, right? No, that seems very unlikely. Um, and because you can't do it retroactively, it would basically uh, it would basically mean that this repeating of the term never gets implemented, but the Gemara reinterprets it. Tanarava. Lo Yishobanim L'Rabo Ein Yishobanim. So we said before that you have to have a wife and children because the story that the Torah sets up is you say, I love my wife, my children that I acquired as during my servitude and my master. So what if you don't have a wife and children, the servant? If you do have the L'Rabo Ein Yishobanim, but the master have Enodim, then you can't do it in that part. Somebody's got a lot of feedback going on there. Somebody's got a lot of feedback going on. Anybody else on besides Charles? Charlie, you've got, there you go. Thank you. Um, so what if you have a wife and children, but your master does not? Enonirza. Then there's no extension of the term. Because it says because he, the servant, loves you and your family, your household, literally, which often is a term for the wife, and in this case, the wife and kids. So the master also has to have a wife and kids that the servant wants to stick with. Now, what about the converse? L'rabo isho named below any shabai. What if your master has wife and children and you, the servant, don't? And there it also doesn't go. Because it says, as we mentioned before, when the Torah sets it up, it's I love my wife and my children and my master. So these things all have to be true in order for us to implement this extension of the term. Also says, I love my master. What if he doesn't love you, right? Doesn't go. As it says, the follow on to this phrase is because it's good for you with your master, right? So imach implies that the master also loves him. Uh, so, I mean, it's kind of obvious that if the master doesn't want him to extend this term, then it won't be done. What if the master likes the servant doesn't like the master? And then there's also doesn't go because he loves you. He, the servant, loves you, the master. So if that is not the case, then even if there's other factors that would encourage you to stay and to renew, we're not going to do it. What if you, the servant, is sick, but not your master? And if so, also doesn't go. It's because it says, as we said before, it's good for him, good for the servant with the master. So being sick is the opposite of good. What if the master is sick and if the servant is not? Then again, we don't do it. Shenemar imach. Imach implies that there's a parallel or a equivalence between the master and the servant. So just as if you, the servant, are sick, you don't extend the term. If the master is sick, same thing. Bibi Barabai, Bibi asks, Shneim Cholim Mai, what if they're both sick? So they're both equivalent, right? So you don't have a problem there with the equivalence. Imach Binan, is that the operative word that they have to be equivalent? Va'ika, they're both sick. Or they have to be equivalent in good health, right? Which is not the case. Take it, so the Gemara doesn't resolve um, that question, which is a little odd again because you know we're interpreting tov lo, that's good for you with him, right, with your master. Um, Tov seems to be good health, right? Rather than just the abstract concept of health, but that's the Gemara doesn't resolve it that way and loses our result. Tell her about the rabbis taught. Again, expounding on this phrase, it's good for the servant with the master. Imach b'machal, imach b'mishnah. This tells you that when you have a servant, you have to be equivalent. You have to treat him equivalently to yourself. You have to give him the same. You, the master, can't eat, fine flour, white bread, and give him some food that's made with inferior flour. You can't be drinking the good wine and let him have the cheap wine. You sleep on a horsehair mattress, and he has to sleep on on straw, a bed of straw. Can't do that. You have to treat him equally to yourself. When you get a servant, you're not getting a servant, you're getting a master, because you have to keep him in the manner to which you have become accustomed. Tana Rabbi Stop. This is, I think, often is seized on as a detail in this whole idea of servitude, that just because someone is your servant doesn't mean you can mistreat him. So it's a kind of a different type of arrangement than one might have otherwise expected. That a servant is someone you can abuse. Basically, that's not the case. You cannot abuse your servant, at least from this source and in this way. So when the servant goes free, he goes free with his children that were born, from let's say this is referring to when a master gives him a wife in his servitude, and she bears him children, and those children go free when he goes free. Like, of course they go free. They were never subject to servitude. The father may have been sold into servitude for his debts, but the children were born, debt free. So why would you think that the master has any right to them? This teaches you that in what sense do they go free? They go free of the master's obligation to feed them. This teaches you that if your servant has children, you're responsible for supporting them. Once the servant obtains his freedom, then you're off the hook. Similarly, find as follows: if you're married, the servant is married, then his wife goes out with him. Same thing. Like, why would you think otherwise? The woman was never sold into slavery. So it tells you that what does she go free from? She goes free from being supported by the master. And you have to tell us both cases of the wife and the children. They can only talk about the sons, the children. Because, who else is going to support these children? Children can't earn a living. They're children, right? And how are they going to go out and get a job? So therefore, we would say that's why the Torah says the master has to feed them. But the wife, let her go get a job, right? Why the master have to support her just because this guy sold himself to me in slavery? Aim at top of the table. Maybe she has to earn her own living. So that's why this rule, Rabbi Shimon tells us that no, it's not so, that the master is responsible for the wife. The Yashmina Ishna, what if it only told us about the wife and not the children? Because, let's say there's no way to earn a living, we can always go beg door to door, right? So it's not dignified for a woman. It's not the practice of a woman to go begging from door to door. The children, the Arkayu, right? You often see children begging in the streets. Aim along. So maybe in this formulation, it's the children who have the ability to earn their own living, as it were, by begging. But the wife, it's not appropriate for her to do so, and not normal for her to do so. So maybe the master would have to provide for the wife, not the children. So three, so you have to tell us both. No, the master is responsible for both wife and children. Rabbi Spot. Ilu Namar Osno Badelas. Haisi Omer Yidkar Keneged Osno Badelas. So now we're going to the ritual of putting a taking an awl and putting a hole in the earlobe and in the doorway, in the doorpost. So it says v'nasato be'ozno ubadelas. You put it in his ear and the doorway. So if it had not used the conjunction and, v'nasato ozno badelas, Haisi Omer Yidkar Keneged Osno Badelas. Sorry, no, what it's commenting on is leaving out the base, right? If it says put it in his ear and in the door. What if it only said and put his ear in the door? Osno Vadelis. So Haisi Omer Yidkar Keneged Osno Vadelis, meaning I would have thought you don't have to pierce the ear, you pierce the doorway opposite where his earlobe would be if he stands in the doorway. But it doesn't say that. It says Osno Vadelis, meaning both in his ear and door. Delis in Osnolo. So the Gemara says, well, wait, what kind of question is that? Like, would you really think that you only pierce the doorway and not the ear? The wind up of this paragraph is the master pierces his ear with an awl. So it clearly the ear is included. So why would you think that the ear is not included from the other verse? Maybe it means that you pierce the ear while outside, like not in the doorway. And then go to the doorway and then pierce the doorway opposite the ear. So it tells you that's not the case. You take the awl and you go through the ear into the doorway. So anyway, so Talmud Lomar Baz nobody else. And the reason, the way we know that is in his ear and in the doorway. How do you do that? You go through the earlobe till you get to the doorway, the doorpost. Dallas, now it has to be a door. Shamayani Bain Akura Bain Shaina Akura. Now maybe you can do this with a door that was taken off of its hinges and taken out of the doorway, right? Lomar mezuzah. So the Torah says the doorpost. So by referring to the mezuzah, to the doorpost, it means that you have to actually drill it into the door while the door is in the doorway. So you can't just go to Home Depot, pick out a door, and do it there. It has to be a door hanging in the doorway. Rabbi Yochanan would expound this verse in the Torah as a chomer. It's unclear what chomer means. It means, he translates here, a packet. Rashi understands it as a little package of like an amulet, or some people wore a little bag of spices. So it's a tight little package. Tosfos understands it a little differently. Takes it from Arabic, but it's not clear to me what he's saying. So I'm not sure what this means, like a packet, but it's a little compact little lesson, right? A little pearl. What is this drasha? Why do you pierce the ear rather than any other body part as the symbol of continuing his service? Because God says, what the ear that heard me, God, pronounce on Har Sinai that the people of Israel are my servants. So we are directly servants to God, not servants to someone, not indirectly. There's no intermediary. We're not servants to someone else who is a servant to God. So you heard that with your ear, and you want to extend your service. You've gotten yourself a master. Let the ear be pierced. Now, this is just homiletic, because why don't you do that when the person first sells himself into servitude? But anyway. Rabbi Shimon bar Rabbi has another little pearl of wisdom from this passage. Why the doorway? Amar Kodesh Baruch Hu, Demos Mezuzah Shehu Edim B'Mitzrayim, B'Shosha Pasachti Al Mashkal V'Yashtei Mezuzos. What do we know about doors and doorposts? That's where the people of Israel smeared the blood from the original Pesach sacrifice in Egypt on the doorway, on the doorpost. So you heard, or you are subject to that event. The Amarti and I, God, said at that time, Ki li b'nei Yisrael avadim, the same idea that the people are my servants. Lo avadim, lo avadim, but there's not an intermediary. So, and I delivered you from servitude. Now, here, this one makes a little more sense because we're talking about the point where God freed the people, right? So, here's the point where the servant is becoming free or should be becoming free, and yet he wants to stay on. And you're deciding, I'm not going to be freed. You're also bifneim, so let this piercing of the ear take place involving the doorway and the doorpost. Okay. Next mission. We switch now from an Eved Ivri to an Eved Kanani, a non-Jewish servant, for whom, of course, the rules are different. So we've already seen that this term of servitude, it goes to the Yovel. There's no 6-year limit, and there are a bunch of other distinctions. But our mission is concerned primarily with how you acquire people. First was a woman as a wife, and then another Ivri, and now we're talking about Eved Kanani. You can acquire the Eved Kanani through money or a document or chazaka, some action which is defined as providing this acquisition. How does he acquire his freedom? The kesef al yedei acherim, through money, somebody else's money, with a document on his own, through himself. That's what Rebbe Meir says. And the Gemara will go into great detail on exactly what we're talking about here. Your own money, somebody else, who's accepting the document, etc. So we'll see what the Gemara says about this. And actually, the Gemara will introduce, we'll see tomorrow, a third disputant in the Mishnah, which is not referred to in the Mishnah, in order to kind of understand, what the separate positions are. The rabbis say the opposite. Money through on his own, like has to be his own money through which he redeems himself. If you're using a document, it's through other people. Right now, we're understanding this to be both of these phrases are the words of the Chachamim. The Seven Gemara will reinterpret this. But the money has to be other people's money. Okay, so we'll see what this means. Meanwhile, where do you get the idea that, in the first place, that kesef, shtar, v'chazaka are the 3 ways that you can acquire a Kanani servant? Receive, visnachaltem, osam, uvnechem, acharechem, vareshas achuza. These slaves, you can, they're inherited to your children. They're provided as an inheritance to your children to inherit them. You know what else gets inherited? Ancestral lands, right? And how do you acquire land? Through money, a deed, or a chazaka, performing an action that brings it into your control. So the Eved Kanani is same thing. So Gemara says you must say Achuza, Choseres, Labal, and Biyobel. Okay, you want to compare this to an ancestral field. What happens to an ancestral field at Yovel? It goes back to the original owners. Af Eved Kanani, Choser, Labal, and Biyobel. You're going to say that about the Eved Kanani as well. So the Torah says you can enslave them forever. So I misspoke before. I think I said that Eved Kanani goes for Yovel. That's not the case, of course. The La'olam B'hem Tavoda means the Kanani slave, non-Jewish slave, serves you forever without Yovel freeing it. Tana, we have a brisa. Af b'chalip. There's a fourth way to acquire a Evet Kanani, which is kinyan chalipin, right? What's a kinyan chalipin? Where you take some symbolic object, like if I want to buy a field, but we're not at the field, or it's not there's a document or whatever. You just want to give it to me, so you give me some other object, a movable object, which to symbolize the field, which I then do a kinyan on by picking it up or pulling it towards me or whatever, and that is an exchange. Is I think the way to like a not an exchange, but a stand-in, right? What's a better word? Um, it's a stand-in for the acquisition of the field. The ton would be done. So if there is a fourth way, why doesn't our Mishnah mention it? Milsa delays have been talking in Katana. We're only talking about things that acquire what a slave, after all, is not real estate, right? He should be categorized with metalton. It's something that is movable. Um, so we're only talking about things that that's not effective for other movable objects. So you can't acquire a movable object just with a shtar or just with money or just with a kazaka. You actually have to pick it up and take control. And that same thing. So the Eved, we're pointing out things that are actually valid for Eved, even though he is considered metallic. Those are like these are the but it's leaving out the other things. I'm Kenyan Khalifa. Our Mishnah leaves it out because that is something that is valid for metaltalin. So obviously it's valid for an Eved. Our Shmuel, Eved Kanani nickname Mashiach. Shmuel says an Eved Kanani can be acquired through pulling him towards you, like other metaltalin. Okay, so that has that go to kafo bas. If you grab him, grab his arm and pull him towards you, then that's how you acquire him. Karo was. So look, no. But if you just call him and say, "Come over here," and he comes over here, that doesn't count. That's not Mashiach. So Bishlama Watan be done according to our Tana, Milsa Yisabim and Tani. So I understand why this isn't included in the Mishnah because we're not talking about things. We're only talking about things that don't work for metaltalin, but still work, but also work for a slave. The last of them metaltalin. So the list of them tells me, look, Katani, he's only taught our mission is only listing things that don't work in general for metaltalin, for movable objects, but do work for a slave, to acquire a slave. Oh, a ton of bra, but for the other tana that includes chalipin, name Mashiach. Like, why leave out Mashiach, right? If pulling something towards you, pulling the slave towards you also works, you've already counted chalipin, which is something that doesn't work for metaltalin. I'm sorry, that does work for metaltalin. So why not also mention Mashiach if that's true? Tanaim also the Isa bein b'mekarkei bein b'metaltalin. The Brisa is only talking about things that work both for land and metaltalin. Mashiach the metaltalin Isa calculation. That's why I left out Mashiach, pulling something close to you because it doesn't work for that. Okay. Okay, so looking back at what Shmuel said, it only works if you physically pull him towards you, but not if you call him and he comes towards you. Why not? We have another mission, another Bryce. Case has been talking about acquiring an animal now. How do you acquire an animal? One of the ways you can do it is handing it over. If you grab it by its hoof, the shara by its hair, the hukaf shawel by its saddle, the shalif shawel by the load that it's carrying, but prumbia shabafia or by the bit in its mouth, or by zusha tzavara, or the bell on its neck, no. Then that is considered having it handed over to you. In case of the Mashiach, one is pulling it towards you. Kori love hiba, if you call it and it comes to you. Shehikisha b'makal brasol, or you hit it and it causes it to run towards you. Kevash akbar yad b'regel, as soon as it lifts a hand and a foot, I guess a foreleg and a hind leg, then you acquire it. And Ravasi, Omer no, it's not just one foreleg and one hind leg, it moves one body length towards. But in any case, what did it say? If you call it. and cause it to come to you by calling it, right? So this source indicates that calling the animal to come towards you is Mashiach. Does count. On the previous one, we said no, that doesn't count. That you actually have to pull it towards you. Amrei, so the answer is Behema Data Gemara. Um, and what's the difference between an animal and an Adam? An animal, it's like, why is it obeying you? Because it obeys its made, as it were, its nature is to obey its master. So pulling it towards you or calling it to you, it's the same thing. It doesn't have, it's not considered to have an independent will, right? But an Eved, adopted nafshe, he's walking toward because he wants to. Not you're not forcing them. Like you could consider the case of an animal to be like you're forcing the animal to come to you by calling it. It's if it's trained that way, it's a Pavlovian reaction. But if I call a servant to come towards me, he can decide I don't feel like it. Right? The fact that he walks towards you is not necessarily because you called him. So that's why that doesn't count as a king. It's under his own steam, as it were. Amravashi, uh, Amravashi, Eved Katan Kivehemadabe. What about a minor who's a slave? Then we consider that like an animal. We don't consider him to have his own independent will. He's trained to follow orders. Okay. Honorable. Case of a chazaka. What does a chazaka mean when it comes to an Eved? If the slave takes off your shoe for you, it does some service to you, like taking off your shoe, or carries your towel to the bathhouse, or undresses you, washes you, rubs you with oil, gerdo, scrape the skin, hilbisho, dresses you, himilo, you put on your shoe, himilo, lifted them up, help them get up, and that is a chazaka. That is how you acquire. That's one way you can acquire the slave. He's done some service for you. Or Shimon lote chazaka the chazaka should not be any better than lifting. Lifting something always is considered a kinyan. Um, so 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 it's certainly going to work as a chazaka. So it sounds like he's agreeing with the Tanakama, and he's saying yes, but when you mentioned chazaka, especially that one. I mean, you mentioned hagbad, lifting him up, especially that one, because that is always that's kona even the Talmud. My comment, what's he saying? Like, is he just agreeing with the Tanakama? But what about all the other things? Does he not agree with those also? Ravashi, Higvio Hula Rabo Kanal. That what Rabbi Shimon was talking about. The Brisa is talking about if the slave lifts the master, like in all the other cases that it mentions where the slave does something of service to the master. Rabbi Shimon says it also goes the other way when it comes to lifting up, right? That Hagba, lifting up, is even if the master lifts up the servant, that's also done. Okay, but again, it's not a disagreement. It's just he's just commenting on that the nature of Hagba, of lifting someone, is different than all the other things, and that if the master does something for the slave, that's not a chazaka. That's not an act of acquisition unless it's lifting him up, helping him up, which is an act of acquisition. So So now you're saying that if the slave lifts up the master, then that's a kinyan for the master. So now consider the case of a woman who is acquired as a Levet Kanani, which we call a Shifcha Kananis. If you sleep with her, then isn't she lifting you up? She's supporting your weight. So that should count too. So where it says Kikam Rinan, Zenena Vizemitzar. No, and that what we're talking about is you're kind of lifting him against your will. He is like if the master is lifting you, no, if the slave is lifting you up, then it's hard work for him, and for you it's a benefit, right? You're enjoying it, like you are enjoying the fruits of his labor. In the case of sleeping with a shifra kanani, you're both enjoying it. right? So we don't consider that an act of service that she's lifting you up. You're both having a good time, so that's not considered a kinyan, sleeping with it. So Shalokadaka Wakel Neymar, so Gemara says, okay, well, what if you're in a different position, right? What if you're doing it in a way that she does not enjoy? So probably the Gemara is referring to anal intercourse and assuming that the woman is not enjoying it, right? So in that case, she is supporting your weight. You're getting the benefit. She is not, and she's supporting your weight. So shouldn't that count as an active acquisition? Amar Vachai Bar Ada, Dominacha, Vachai answers, Man Lemolan to love Hana, you salute with Tarvayo. What are you talking about? How do you know that she's not enjoying it? Maybe she's enjoying it too. The O, Mishkave Isha Ksiv, and also um, when the Torah talks about the prohibition of against homosexuality, so Lotishkav Zachar Mishkave Isha, don't sleep with a man the way you would with a woman. That uses the plural Mishkave Isha. So by using the plural, Hikisha Kasu Kedarka Shalo Kedarka. The Torah is referring to two types, which makes sense in the case of homosexual intercourse, right? There's no vaginal intercourse, obviously. There's only anal intercourse, and it's both considered mishkave isha, the way you sleep with the woman, um, and so that supports the idea that that I think that supports the idea that you would acquire. Um, no, it's supporting the idea that maybe the woman is can enjoy anal intercourse as well, and therefore they're both enjoying it, and um, therefore it's not considered a means of acquisition because the primary thing going on here is the pleasure that they're getting, and not that she is supporting your weight and, as it were, lifting you up. Okay. I think I told David that this is where we will get up to. No, we're going to go a little further. Rabbi Yehuda Hindua Ger Shein Lo Yarshin. Rabbi Yehuda Hinda was a convert, and he had no relative, no one to inherit from him. Cholash, he became ill. Al Marzutra Shayulabe. Marzutra went to see how he was. Chazye de Takifle Al Matuva. He saw that he was on the idiom meaning that he was on the brink of the next world, right? He was like about to die. So he said to his Marzutra said to the Aved Kanani of Rabbi Yehuda, who was dying, Shlofli Misanohe Vamtinu Levesa. Here, take my shoes and carry them home for me, right? In other words, he wanted to do once Rabbi Yehuda died, his Eved Kanani would be available property, right? Anyone, since he has no relatives, anyone could come and acquire his property. So Marzutra is jumping the gun here and saying, you know what, do this service for me, and he figures that way he'll be engaged in a act of chazaka as Rabbi Yehuda dies, and then he will be the one that gets the Evet Now, what was the case? Some say that the slave was an adult. Zu perishal misa, zu perishal chayim. Rabbi Yehuda, he went to his eternal reward, as we say, and the other Marzutra, perishal chayim, and he continued to live, but it's saying that he kind of took over his property, his Evet right? Some say that the slave was still a minor. With the long Havashal, and this refutes Havashal, the Tanya. We have a price. So Ger Shemesu Bizbuzu Yisrael Nechaslav. If a ger dies without relatives, and people are just coming to claim his property, and among the property were slaves, whether they were adults or minors, they become free. Yes, the Gedolim, and this explains why Mar Zutra wanted him to be engaged in an act of chazaka at the time that the death occurred, and he would have achieved his freedom. Because once he becomes free, you can't acquire him anymore, like, unless he's purchased or whatever. So Abba Shaul says, so the Tanakh says that whether the slave is adult or minor, they become free on the death of the owner. Abba Shaul Omer Gedolim Kol Aslan Beichorim Ketanim Kol Mafti Behem Zafada. Abba Shaul says no, it's only the adults who go free, but a minor remains enslaved, and whoever until someone picks them up, whoever picks them up and acquires them can acquire them. And we will pick up here tomorrow. Actually, tomorrow I will not be doing this in person, but there will be a recording available and sent out. Enjoy the holiday, everybody.
Thank you. Thank you, Dov.
Thank you, Dove.